that I teach called at York called Food, Land, and Culture. So welcome to my students who should be here watching, and also welcome to all the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee people who are joining us too, since this is the theme that we're looking at today. I'm gonna start. I mean, I'm thinking about this theme kind of started making me think a lot about territory and land, and this area, especially where we are in the North Shore of Lake Ontario. So I'm going to read I haven't done this exactly per reading a land acknowledgement since we started. I did sort of different things. So anyway, I'm going to read the one that York has. Here we are, land acknowledgement. We recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Tekaranto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. It is now home to many Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and this territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. I'll introduce myself. Bojo Nisue Gami Kwe Indigenous Swab Shashi Dodem. I'm Lisa Myers, and I am my mom's side of my family's from Chimnasing or Beausoleil First Nation, and my dad's grew up in a town west of Toronto called Oakville, and he's from English and Austrian kind of heritage. So I'm really happy to be here, and I want to thank all the speakers. I want to thank my colleagues, Dana Prieto, her and I worked a lot this summer to put together this series, and also my other colleague, Sheila Kola, who, because of her contribution and her support and her encouragement for us to make a speaker series of our choice, really, just edging us towards what we have done here. So thank you to all my colleagues at EUC, and also I want to acknowledge the support from the Faculty of Environmental and Urban Change, also some funding from New Frontiers, and the York Sustainability Innovation Fund for making it possible to bring so many people together for this series of conversations over this whole, these 2 semesters. I also want to humbly say I so appreciate the generosity of Chandra, Joe, and William to be in conversation today. So, so moving right along, today's theme is Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee food systems. And although this theme seeks to be more specific, to create more conversation, more specific around nations and food, we cannot cover everything, obviously. And but I think we can start to consider how language and teachings and territory and shared histories are all part of food and medicines, and how yeah. So I think those are really important. I think this conversation is really important, and I think it's also important to mention that Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee have a history of conflict and of also negotiating treaties, lots of, multiple treaties to build relationships. And one of which I mentioned was mentioned in the York University land acknowledgement is to share the bowl or share the land. And this is and it's a reference a lot in land acknowledgements, if, from areas around Lake Ontario. But I want to just say it's one of many that Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe people have negotiated over, through history. And I think that the dish with one spoon that it mentions and talks about the land as a bowl, I think it's really relevant and really connects to the conversation that we're going to have, thinking about land and thinking about food. So with that said, I'm honored to be gathering together with 3 people here in this virtual space and putting together this week's theme. when we were putting this together, we were inspired by something that Chandra Maracle, one of the people that are here with us, asked, and she questioned the sort of flattening of specifics, like when we use the phrase Indigenous food systems. And it's a sort of flattening and not thinking about the individual nations and communities. So as a Haudenosaunee person who is involved in food advocacy and security in her community, she wanted to talk with Anishinaabe people to think through food and medicine. And so seeking this nuance calls for conversations among ourselves, and not only in relation or in tension with colonial centered inquiries or discussion. So I think this really opens up this possibility, and that's why we're here, to see continuation and resilience of our understandings and practices with food and medicines. So in response to Chandra's question, we decided to ask Chandra to come together with Joe Pitawanakwat and William Kingfisher to discuss medicine, food, and to have an exchange on practices that are on and in the ground here. So we'll see where that goes. That's just what I think. And I also want to make a note, like, to center this conversation, or I feel a responsibility, and maybe you could share it with me, Chandra, Joe, and William, to center this conversation in a way that remembers not everyone has access to traditional foods and medicines, or don't have that knowledge at this point. And to keep in mind, people from other First Nation communities are watching today, and think about that audience. So I'm going to read everyone's bios, and then there's going to be, each of you are going to do around a 10-15 minute presentation, and then we're going to have a conversation. So I really like that you each get to present, so we each know where you're coming from. So I'll just start by, maybe we should just decide who's going to go first. Maybe which we'd first supposed to do earlier, but it would be good to know who would like to go first today. Dana, did we have a thought on that? We did have a thought on that.
Yeah,
William,
we had a thought on
first
for William to start, for the Chandra to follow, and Joe to.
Okay, that's what our thought was. Thank you. Okay. So let me be smart about the way that, so William's going to go first, so I'll do William's bio last. So anyway, so I'll just read the bios of everyone right now. Chandra Maracle was born and raised on the west side of Buffalo. She is of Sicilian and German ancestry on her mother's side, and Gayaga, I didn't practice my Mohawk pronunciation. I'm so bad. Can you help me?
Nyakgehada.
Ancestry on her father's side. She is the mother of four daughters and lives in 6 nations of the Grand River. Chandra is the founder of Gaia. I'm the worst Anishinaabe person. Gaia, is that it? Real people eat real food. Exploring links between food, people, language, and land. She recently completed a second year in the Onwe Gaia Adult Mohawk Language Immersion Program. She is co-founder and nutrition coordinator of Skaro yes, Goa. Okay, the Everlasting Tree School. I apologize for my really bad ability to pronounce, and I should have checked with you before. And president of the Revitalization Society, the Gaia Revitalization Society. She studied at Cortland College, University of Buffalo, and University of Salamanca, Spain. She is currently a PhD student at York University in the Faculty of Environmental Studies, focusing on Haudenosaunee food history and eating psychology. And she is also a collaborator on York U's The Legacies Project Earth to Tables. Excuse all of my mispronunciations. I apologize so much. Joseph Pitawanakwat is a member of the Wikwemikong First Nation and currently resides on Manitoulin Island. He is a medicine and plant educator and knowledge keeper with a passion for the healing properties of plants. His plant and medicine research has reached 40 countries and has been translated to over 25 different languages. Joseph is currently doing his master's in environmental studies at York University, working on Indigenous environmental justice. He is the founder and director of Creator's Garden, a year-round Indigenous land-based education business. Joseph has engaged hundreds of young Indigenous people through his outdoor, indoor, and online teaching initiatives, and he has developed curriculum and lectured in universities and colleges in Canada and the United States. William Kingfisher is an independent arts curator, gardener, and a member of the Gittigan Project at art organization that works to contribute to the community by growing of food and to contribute to the continuation of different ways of looking at the world through the Anishinaabe language and the concepts within the language. Making connections to the land is also an important concern. Understanding food production as politics and its connection between the local and global are also some areas the Gittigan Project has explored in recent projects. Kingfisher is a member of the Chippewas of Rama First Nation, Rama. Some recent projects include Land Power, the significance of gardens in Anishinaabe communities, past and present, that's between 2018 and 2021. And Darwin, relationships in methodology in an Indigenous garden in 2018 to 2021. Ikitigan glyphs, contemporary signs for Anishinaabe garden. 2017, Arthur Schilling, The Final Works. 2016 to 2018, the Two Garden Project, Curve Lake and Peterborough, strengthening relationships in 2013. GBIG at the edge where the water and the land meet, 2012, and Yandagon, outdoor art installations in Anishinaabe Garden, 2010. So lots of amazing projects. And with that, I will turn it over to you, William, if you want to give us a little presentation that you prepared. Let me know if you need any assistance there.
Anin, Bojo, Sego. Thank you, Lisa and Dana, for inviting me here to speak about my work with gardens and with art. As Lisa said, I'm an independent curator from the Chippewas of Rama First Nation. Presently, I live in just north of Peterborough, about 10 minutes from the Curve Lake Reserve. And in recent years, I've created projects grounded in using my gardens as a curatorial space to engage in the language and philosophy of traditional Anishinaabe and specific concepts within the language. My latest exhibition is about relationships. It's called Enowindowin, which is the Anishinaabe word for relationships. And in general, the exhibition is about our relationship to our natural world today. To traditional Anishinaabe, the record heat waves, devastating droughts, floods, massive forest fires, and powerful hurricanes can be interpreted as manifestations of us humans moving away from a traditional relationship to the larger world and our place within it. I feel I have only begun creating projects and connecting this with my work in gardens in recent years. At one time in my life, they were separate, but they have come together in recent years in the projects I've been working on. And what I'd like to do is share two stories with you that I feel are important for understanding how I think about my projects. The first story is in the early 90s, I was living in New Mexico. I was working on an MFA in painting and printmaking at the University of New Mexico. One of my professors was having an exhibition of paintings in Albuquerque, his first since a fire destroyed his studio and all the paintings in it. I was in his outdoor drawing class, and myself and the rest of the class decided to go to his opening. When I got there, I could see his paintings consisted of landscapes, and in each he put in the figure of Kokopelli. And Kokopelli is the humpback flute player seed bringer. It's an important figure in the mythology of the Pueblo and the Hopi. I was a bit surprised. I asked him, why would you put Kokopelli in your paintings, and what do you know about him? And he said, well, I don't know anything, but I'm interested in learning, so I put him in my paintings, and in this way I will learn about him. The exhibition started, and he said, sit here, and I'll show you how it works. So I sat, And throughout the evening, people would come up to him and after seeing Kokopelana's paintings, would proceed to tell him a story. At the end of the evening, he had all these stories about Kokopelli, and he said, well, now I have all these stories. That is how you learn from painting. That is how you learn from your paintings. So the second story is that years later, after I moved to Ottawa from New Zealand, I found myself working in the Contemporary Native Art section at the Canadian Museum of Civilization, which is now the Museum of History. I was working there as a curator while finishing my master's degree at Carleton. When I finished my master's, I left Ottawa and went to live in my home community of Rama. There I started a community garden. My master's degree was about how we, as Native artists, create a particular space of meaning where we combine aspects of our traditional past with contemporary concerns. But after I finished it, I was dissatisfied with my understanding of the traditional. I kept wanting to explore this more, wanting to know how it can be useful in today's world. So I worked in the community for a while, and then I decided to do a PhD at Trent University in a Native Studies department to explore this idea more fully. It just kept bothering me. So I liked that they had elders in the department. For my PhD, I proposed to do a series of visual art exhibitions, but when I got there, the art gallery was not going to be built. They forgot to tell me about that. But that was okay. I started working in the department's theater, which is called MIIJIM, First People's Performance Space. And there I started to explore traditional Anishinaabe stories to use for our performances, for our mask making and dances. I was also doing gardens in Peterborough and Curve Lake, growing our traditional foods. I started to combine these interests and did a project that is called Ayandagan, Outdoor Art Installations in an Anishinaabe Garden in 2011. The word Ayandagan is an old word that just means where we are today. So I wanted to kind of explore that. And it was through my work at MIIJIM that I came across the idea of how our ancestors' knowledge exists in our blood. And it is through ritual, ceremonial, as well as through our dance and movements that it can be remembered and brought forth. The project Ayandagan brought the garden together with performance, visual art, and song, and created a space for stories, and through our movement and being on the land, brought forth memories and stories of our ancestors and our traditional world. It was really a fun project. These are just two stories that inform my work today. From them, I learned that you can set up a particular space and that certain things will happen, and which is definitely a valuable lesson for a curator. And that you can set up your art projects so that they are things you want to learn about. And that the traditional is remembered in our bodies, and it is through movement and being out on the land that it can be brought forth. And through art, it can be shared and experienced. My latest curatorial project is called Win-to-Win Relationships, as I alluded to earlier, and it is to be held at the McMaster's Museum of Art in Hamilton in the fall of 2021. I have invited 10 artists who will speak about our traditional relationship to the natural land. Their methods are varied. So far, some are allowing the beauty of butterflies to slow down our time so we can look closely. Another one is bringing forth and listening to the animals in our dreams. Another is teaching about food, where it comes from, and it's important to our history and well-being. Another is making use of handmade local materials to create art. Another is creating garden spaces as reconnection. And another is evoking mythical time as a space for remembering. These works are about looking closely at the world and towards the future while considering relationships to our natural world as sites of learning and creation. The work is not about going back to some previous time, but how to bring this world into our lives, keep it going, and most importantly, how do we use it in the world today? Thank you.
Thanks, Miigwech,
I
William.
just wanted to give you a little overview of my work.
Amazing. Thank you. I learned more than I know, even though we've hung out together and talked about these things. So do you want to, Joe, do you want to go next then? Or is it Chandra?
I think it's Chandra.
Chandra.
Okay, Chandra. And Chandra, you're not muted. Okay, good. Okay.
Wat ko nung wala doon sa wagwego. Nawajiwa agwasanayanda na yung gamanizalade. Jimmy wanizalio, yung gamanizalade ne gantone diageo sa roro. Igehlea girno dokaleni gawana gene kana wala dumsala. So welcome and greetings everyone, and thank you for having me today. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to share a little bit briefly in English what I might normally do in Gunyagaha or in Mohawk. And not just because it's Haudenosaunee protocol, but because it's related to the work that I'm currently working on, or that I've just been finishing up for my first comprehensive exam towards my PhD. So normally what we would do is to open up a meeting, we would share these words, the words of greetings and love and thankfulness to all of the things in the natural world. And we would also say, Nyawaji Skatne, that we're here together today. And I might also say, I hope that you all have peace in your minds today. We're all carrying quite a heavy load, I think, right now, with a whole lot of things going on in the world. So just to say that acknowledgement that collectively as human beings, we're all going through a lot right now. And then I would say some words of greetings, love, and respect to all of the things in the natural world that have been here to contribute to us living a good and productive life as human beings. So those things would be, of course, each other as people, to our mother, the earth, to the waters, to the fish in the waters, and then to all of the things on the earth. And those would be the shrubs and the grasses and the roots and the fruits and the berries. And we would particularly mention the strawberry in Haudenosaunee territory. We would also mention the medicine plants and all of the grasses. We would mention the johekwan, the corn, the beans, and the squash, the things that we call our sustenance. We would also mention the animals and the insects, and we would mention the birds and the trees. And we might mention in particular the maple tree and perhaps the white pine. So those are the things on the earth. And then we would move up to the things that are in the sky, but the things that we can see in the sky. We would offer our greetings and our thanks to the winds from the four directions, to the grandfathers who in Haudenosaunee country we call our grandfather thunders. And we would also mention our elder brother, the sun, our grandmother, the moon, and the stars. And then with one mind, we would send our greetings and thanks to the things that are in the sky that we can't usually see with our human eye. And those would be some teachers or prophets that have helped us out through the ages. And we would also send our greetings and thanks to the four beings who are always there looking out for our best interests as helpers of the Creator. And then with one mind, we would send our greetings and our thanks out to the one that we call the Sungwaya Disum, the one who has created our bodies, or the one who has finished our bodies. And we would also mention this which is the strength of nature, this force that's in all living things. And so with one mind, we would send all of the greetings and thanks to those things. And I would mention that I've done the best I can to do that, and I did not intend to leave anything out. So I wanted to do this today, not just because it's Haudenosaunee protocol, but one of the things I've been working on most recently in my 30 years of doing food work is I've been taking a really in-depth look at Jijo Jasuwan Jiohunjade, the story of how the world began, or what we often refer to as the creation story. And I've been taking a really in-depth look at that through some food lenses. And I've been thinking about how are all of the things that are mentioned in this Ohanda Galihwadekwan Ganumhaladumsala, or the Thanksgiving address, how are we related to all of them like family? And the creation story tells us all those things. It tells us about our relationship to all of those things. So I've been taking a really in-depth look at that. And I mentioned some of them already, like our elder brother, the sun, and our grandmother, the moon. And I've also been taking a really in-depth look at the origins of some foods in particular in the creation story, but also this concept that comes from the creation story. We often call it the original instructions. But my friend Ryan shared with me that what we really talk about in Ganyak Geha when we talk about the original instructions is this idea of Wagadarihunde or Sungwadarihundung. So he has given us responsibilities, or I have responsibilities. So I've been thinking about food lately in terms of responsibilities. Who are we responsible to and for when it comes to food? As we look at food systems, as we look at our families, what are our obligations and our responsibilities to each other when it comes to food? So I've been thinking about that a real lot lately. One of the things that came out of the creation story is that we've been asked some very simple things. We've been asked to give thanks, and we've been asked to enjoy life. And so all of the things upon which we live have been put here for us to be able to do just that, to be able to express our thankfulness and gratitude, but to live a good life, to enjoy it. So we get caught up a lot, at least I know I do, especially in the context of a whole lot of things going on the planet today, that sometimes I forget to just do that, to enjoy it and have that joy. So going back to something like the creation story will give you the means to be able to remember that there's a whole lot of reasons for which we give thanks and to be joyful. This concept of Gakwa Umwe that I've been working with for a while, I like it. It's a Ganikeha word, and the word itself is kind of simple. It would just mean like original foods, authentic foods, perhaps. It reminds me of really old foods. And so again, these things are coming from the creation story. But as a concept, I like it. And the jokey part of it being real people eat real food, because this umwe is kind of a realifier. So ungwe humwe is what we would refer to ourselves as people. We are the real people, the original people. So with foods, when we think of foods as being real and original, I think of those as being whole foods that come from anywhere on the planet. So it doesn't necessarily have to mean that only foods that are in Haudenosaunee territory are foods that Haudenosaunee people should eat. So this idea that Lisa mentioned when I was asking these questions about the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe food systems, there's this concept of sharing food that comes in the dish with one spoon, but also this idea that we aren't necessarily only meant to eat the foods that are in our landscape. We're just meant to do them in a way that is reciprocal and respectful and sharing. So we can eat other people's foods, but we have to be mindful of doing that in a way that's respectful and reciprocal. So for me, Gakwa Unwe covers a lot of ground. So it's about food, people, language, art, land, science and technology. And for me, it's also about mothering. I have 4 daughters, and so pretty much everything I do every day in my life is somehow related to my daughters. So when we go back to thinking about responsibilities and living life with joy and remembering that we have responsibilities to each other, certainly my first responsibility is to my daughters and my family. So pretty much there's not an hour that goes by in the day where somebody isn't hungry and needs to eat something and then clean that up and then, you know, obtain food somehow and do it all over again. So mothering plays a really big part in the food conversation for me. In the world lately, I'm sitting in Buffalo, New York at the moment. I live at Six Nations, but I'm here in Buffalo where I grew up. And, you know, we just had this big crazy election going on here around me. And so I've been thinking a lot lately about the concepts of white supremacy, systemic racism, specifically as they relate to food. And so I've been thinking a lot, of course, as I go through the creation story over and over again, I've been thinking about the erasure and the subjugation of traditional Haudenosaunee knowledge. And if there's any small part of that that I can bring back into the forefront and introduce that to the overculture, that would be a life well served, I think, for me. So I would like to share with you something that I wrote recently as part of my first comprehensive exam, and I'll leave it there so we can move on to the conversations. But here's my offering to you. This is called Eat the Love. To be real people, we humans have a need to feed our bodies regularly, to keep our spacesuits clean and functioning well, as they house our true nature, that place within us that comes from another, and will one day take its place among the stars. Illumination, solace. Know that when we talk about food, we are just talking about life. When we take in that which we call food, we are taking in the forces of our cosmic family. Eat the love. It could have been different. We could fill up at stations like gasoline for fuel, stick a nozzle in our armpit and be on our way, or plug a 3-prong in our belly button to recharge our batteries. Instead, we get to gather and pick and chop and slice and sip and share and husk and grind and stir and salivate in anticipation and savor. This is our inheritance. This is our birthright. So little asked in return. Dance, sing, enjoy, repeat. So before we begin to talk about food matters, issues, and concerns, I acknowledge you as an eater, one who chooses life with every spoonful. Ganito. Thank you.
Oh, Miigwech. Awesome. That was so good. Thank you, Miigwech. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right, Joe.
Oh man.
Thanks, Chandra. Thanks so much. That was amazing. Okay. All right, Joe.
Yeah, that was crazy. I wanted to clap real bad. But yeah, okay. So I'm Joe. I'm from Wikwemikong on Manitoulin, and yeah, live in Peterborough now. Probably started learning about Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, about plant medicine about 10 years ago, a little bit more than 10 years ago, me and my wife. And once we started learning about medicine, then my community started to realize that that we were learning and then asking us to be providers of medicine. So we were like giving away medicine to people, but we were really watching what was happening and realizing the impact that Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee is going to have, that can have on human health and the health of us and our communities, and so, which we know was in a pretty desperate state right now. So we're pretty happy when our community started to approach us, asking us to teach about medicine, and then one of my favorite things is that other communities started to realize that we were teaching in Wiki, and it was having a pretty amazing impact. So then other communities were like, well, can you come teach us here? Not just stay in Wiki, come over here. So we're like, oh, okay, go teach about medicine over here, and then here and here. And then eventually it just turned into what we will call our business, or Creator's Garden. Now we have and maintain relationships with hundreds of Indigenous communities or over 100 different Indigenous communities in Ontario, and then quite a bit of different institutions and school boards and hospitals and health teams, and it's super fun. So my focus is on medicine. But one of the reasons why I wanted to why I was so happy to be invited to speak with some of these guys, oh, it's gonna be so good, is because I get to kind of talk about a little bit about something else. And so I guess one of the major points that I wanted to cover is that the way that we talk about food when we're teaching about medicine is that a lot of times medicine is going to give us the ability to utilize food Medicine is sort of like this starting point to allow our metabolism to flourish, to allow nutrient absorption to take place at its most powerful level. Actually, just a real quick example. One of the ones that I really like to cover is when we always talk about cedar, or cedar tea, and how important cedar is. Cedar, like it's really amazing to support different detoxification processes that our body has regarding our lymphatic system. It's really, really good for your immune system because of its role in its stimulation of, protection of, and regeneration of your lymphatic system. I wonder if I could show you if it'll, oh, maybe right here. Whoop. So cedar, yeah, and then your lymphatic system. So yeah, for detoxification, your body only gets rid of waste 3 ways, right? You poop, you pee, and you sweat. How does your body get rid of waste via sweat? It's through your lymphatic system. And what really stimulates that process, opening up these little doors in your lymphatic system, it's collecting all of the garbage from all of the dead space in your body. And generally this goes all the way back through and gets dumped back into your blood. And that taxes your kidneys and your liver, have to deal with these toxic components, these rogue proteins. But what cedar does is it activates these doors that allow all of that toxins and all that lymph to empty into a sweat gland that then is just evacuated through the skin. So it makes, detox really good. Your immune system uses your lymphatic system as it's the highway, that the lymphocytes use to be able, and those are responsible for delivering the antibodies that actually kill or control the infection. So it plays a super important role, like in immunity. So of course we should be having this on a regular basis. But in the context of food, one of the things that we really like to talk about and cover is the importance of cedar with nutrient absorption, and especially fat absorption. When you look into identifying the Anishinaabe cuisine, the types of foods that we would eat, and the type of diet that we would have, trying to create a culturally appropriate nutrition plan, where a lot of this research ends up is looking at, different diets that support ketogenesis, or using fat for energy. And so then cedar becomes very important to be able to create and maintain a hefty amount of lymphatic tissue around the duodenum, or the first part of your small intestine. That is, your lymphatic system is actually the one responsible for drawing out the fats from your small intestine, transporting it back into your blood so that it can be utilized as energy. And you can imagine if your lymphatic system is suffering, different damages, not able to repair itself. So lymphangiogenesis is lowered, the lethargy of the system in general, not being able to transport that energy quickly back into the blood, but then being very slow. So in the utilization of fat for energy, absorption and transport is a very crucial step. And cedar plays a very, very important role in that, to be able to maintain the lymphatic tissue, to help with the absorption of, and then the stimulation of the system in general, to be able to get the fat into the blood as fast as possible. This is why when we work with athletes, their cardiovascular, or their ability to conduct long form endurance exercise, is enhanced, noticeably enhanced. This is a largely ketogenic sort of exercise. You're using fat for energy versus glucose, like in a sprint. So it's noticed in the level of an athlete, but also in those who incorporate different, other cultural components like fasting, and do seek out those culturally appropriate eating styles, and maybe foods that, or diets that are that we would call ketogenic. So there's noticeable impact in there as well. Just incorporating one tea, the cedar tea that we would sort of drink even on a daily basis, that will have a huge measurable impact regarding the foods that we're eating. And so when the fat is getting absorbed, that's going to have absorbed and transported and utilized. It's going to have a massive impact on so many different things. So, I mean, medicine has a really important role in giving us the ability to utilize food. There's that, one important thing. But mainly, the one main thing that I really wanted to talk about today is and sort of utilize this platform and these really amazing webinars. So, I mean, yeah, thanks, Dana, Lisa. This is going to be super cool. One of my favorite ideas, and people think about Anishinaabe cuisine. They're like, hey, how did you live like that? When you look in and read about Anishinaabe lifestyle, how did we used to live? And everything is brown. Everything is brown and gray. Our clothes are buckskin brown, our houses are bark brown, and our food is like dried deer meat brown, and everything is like, how did you live like that? You were just, you were surviving for thousands of years. And it's like, oh man, maybe a little bit of dry blueberries mixed in there. And when we look into Anishinaabe cuisine, I always get real jealous because I love Indian food. I love Asian cuisine. These are amazing. And I'm always like ashamed. Oh man, everything is pretty brown here. How can we help with this? And what I really wanted to be able to share today is the vibrancy of our cuisine and the importance of plant knowledge, medicinal knowledge within that. So like behind me, all of the jars of medicine, those are all filled with all different plants, all different seeds, roots, barks, flowers, stems, all of these different things that we utilize for medicinal reasons. So check this out. I'll show you. Let me go back. Ooh. Whoops. Yeah. So all of these different medicines here, we have 119 different species of medicine that we ended up, we harvested for a couple weeks and cooked and reduced to a thick oil called escogomedek that we eat on a regular basis. And so, we use lots of medicine for lots of plants for medicine, but this is also our herb and spice rack. So we use this when we're cooking. And, my grandma remembers her mom pulling food out of the ground from a pit oven. And when she was preparing it, throwing a bunch of big roots inside, like going up to her medicine attic, throwing a bunch of roots inside. Why are you doing that? Putting medicine inside of the food? No, it was for flavor. And so, we have zagadagum. Zagadagum is sweet Sicily, or Myrrhus odorata is licorice root. It contains anywhere from almost 20% glyceric acid, which is that licorice taste, or anise. If you ever cook with anise or these licorice smelling foods, well, we have that here, and it's a mucilage. It's really, really good for every mucous membrane in your body. So from all the way from the mouth to the other end is going to be soothed. And then also that the enhancement of mucosal linings also enhance nutrient absorption, like at the site of the microvilli in the small intestine. So it's very good, for this, but it also tastes very good. We have these really cinnamon tasting types of foods, like from Gabagamish or sweet fern. Comptonia peregrina has those seeds, have this strong, gorgeous cinnamon taste. So that's how it can be used. You know, if you want to perfume your rice, get nice and fancy, couple little aromatic seeds from Goaagamish, and you have this perfumed rice. And then, you know, we have one of my favorites that I kind of wanted to focus on. I could probably find a picture of it. So many pictures here, but over here somewhere. Sorry, I didn't get to fix this before today. Oh, right there, northern prickly ash. So this is Gawkamish, or northern prickly ash, or we call it we call it Gawkamish. Xanthoxylum americanus is the Latin name, and it's used as a medicine for your mouth. There's only 3 types of bacteria that can build up in your mouth and cause an infection. And these seeds have these they're called saponins, this chemistry inside of them that is extremely antimicrobial, but only to 3 strains of bacteria. Oh, it's only the 3 that build up in your mouth. No effect on good bacteria or even other forms of bad bacteria, just to the ones that accumulate inside of your mouth. It's super specific to oral hygiene and oral health. One of the coolest reasons why we like this, the Gawkamish, the prickly ash, so much is for pain. So in order for you to be able to register pain in your gums, the sensory neuron is inoculated with calcium. And then that sends signals to the dorsal root ganglion that your brain registers as pain. I have a toothache, or I got wisdom teeth removed and I cannot eat sandwiches and everything sucks. So what then we do is have these prickly ash seeds, hold them in your mouth. The saponin is absorbed sublingually. So within 5 or 10 minutes, that calcium is drawn from every sensory neuron in your gums, preventing the signal being sent to the dorsal root ganglion. So your brain does not see or understand the pain that's happening here anymore. And so you take somebody who has a toothache, or for teething babies, this medicine is able to remove that issue super quick. It's just absorbed through your mouth, bing, bang, boom. It's like done dealio. And but my favorite has been, if you really want to understand impact, a story that I could share super fast is, if you we've provided this to various facilities, healthcare institutes all across the province, and I'm especially happy when they have a dental team. And when we introduced these, one organization was able to go 8 months without prescribing an opiate for people post-op. So when they would normally be provided with OxyContin, they were given prickly ash seeds as an option. Holding these in your mouth 2 or 3 times a day for a couple hours is really has an impact. So you imagine the influx of prescription drugs into different communities, not just Indigenous communities, but to address the Canadian opioid epidemic. It can have a very huge measurable impact there. So and then, you know, these are Szechuan peppers. Xanthoxylum that grows in Asia is Szechuan peppers, if used in cooking. And so how come we're not using this when we cook? It tastes so good. It has a really strong orange peel taste. And, you know, when we use it in cooking, we're using, we use quite a bit. We're receiving that therapy. I mean, there's immediate use of it to have in your pantry for a toothache or operations or teething babies, but then there's like the chronic benefit of it, being able to control the bacterial growth in your mouth that leads to gingivitis, that is responsible for, you know, the eventual removal of our teeth. So this is something that should be incorporated into our everyday life at the level of our food. And so, like, that's just one plant. I could go over 100 different species that all have different tastes and different flavors, and can be and should be used at that capacity. And now you look at the impact. Yeah, medicine can be used as a therapy, but it should just be a part of our everyday life. And also, you know, just to slap that idea in the face that everything, all of our meals were just dried deer meat brown and gray fish. I think that everything that we're capable of understanding, you know, different plants and their culinary purpose, we're able to understand, yeah, the important therapy that they have and the vibrancy, the meals that you're going to be able to create is just, that's where Anishinaabe cuisine is. And that's what, that's important. If you want to be able to access the life that this land is capable of providing, that is a knowledge that needs to be uncovered and engaged with on a regular basis. I'm making everybody hungry. Sorry if you missed lunch, but yeah, that's pretty good stuff. So I mean, yeah, that's me. I like plants.
Which, Joe, you give me an idea for like a cooking sessions that would be either you know, like all of us could cook together, and you could kind of we could use some more medicines that maybe, you know, but also I think you narrating it, like when you were talking about the sort of cinnamon flavors and rice and things like this, I could just see like connecting a bunch of like cooking to the body and to like our responses, sort of sensory responses to it. Anyway, it's a dream, but and just a thought. I just wanted to open it up and just see if any of you have any questions for each other before I go into some of the questions that I planned. Just in terms of like things that came up when you were listening to each other and thoughts. No pressure though. Well, I'll let the silence hang there for a second. Okay, I'll take the pressure off. I just thought I saw so many thoughts and I saw everybody writing stuff down. So I thought maybe. Chandra, did you want to?
I don't think I can articulate a question, so we should just
okay.
There's just so many things going on in my head.
I know there are so many also, and we've got a really interesting range of, you know, 3 presentations from 3 different places. But so maybe I'll just start, you know, and some of it came through in the talks that were given, and it's interesting and ironic and because it brings me again to my humbling place where, as I tried to read through your bio, Chandra, how I realized I'm not very good at reading Mohawk language, and I wanted to apologize, but also just to like make it an interesting point, perhaps turn it around, that it's that's an interesting kind of across, you know, Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee is like, you know, the difference in language and so I guess I demonstrated that well, not to get out of it, but, you know, but the first question is around language, and you know, William mentioned Gitagan and this concept of the garden, but I'm wondering how language factors into all of your understandings of medicine and or food, and if there are words or concepts that, you know, maybe stand better within your own languages that you wanted to sort of bring forward or talk about. But like, yeah, generally, how does language factors into understanding of medicine / and or food? Anyone want to take it up?
William.
I wouldn't mind talking about Gitagan. Can I talk about Gitagan?
Yeah, that's great. That'd be great if you did.
All right. When I use the word Gitagan, I think about the history of my community in Rama and the farms that we used to have near Coldwater. I know gardens have a range of histories in Anishinaabe communities. There's a whole history of the residential schools. So there's some elders I work with language, but they will not have a garden because of that experience. But others, it seems like most people are really interested in gardens as a way to connect to the land. But the word Gitagan is the word for garden in Anishinaabe. But there's much more to it. If you break the word down linguistically, Gitagan, according to the elder Gitaga Doug Williams from Curve Lake, he says it means spots on the land or spotted land. Gittiga, the first part of the word, is a word for spots, or like a mottled thing, and like on a duck or something, or the water. And when you add an "in" to the end of the word, it means it is on the land, so it's spots on the land. In the report from our community, Rama, there was a report put out a few years ago called the Cold Water Reserve. And in this report, there was descriptions of our farms near cold water. And it described how we grew our gardens. And I read this report and was really interested in these descriptions. And I've come to think of that Gittigan refers to those spots that were cleared in the mainly forested landscapes of our ancestors, where little gardens could be planted that could take care of themselves. They had to, at least for part of the time. And so, you know, what this refers to me is like the Three Sisters Gardens or companion gardens. My community would have to leave for the summer to travel to their fishing grounds. And when they returned, because they had set it up so that they would take care of themselves, you know, they would have beans, corn, squash waiting for them to harvest. So it's a really great way to garden. They set them up as a kind of garden that will take care of themselves while they were gone. So I know that through my language studies that most of the words in Anishinaabe are verbs. So everything is about movement. It's a language about movement and motion. So the word Gittigan, to me, it indicates a methodology, like how do you grow a garden? It tells you in the word. The plants had to take care of themselves after they had begun growing. And so there had to be a good relationship between themselves and the other plants in the area. So this indicates that the garden had to be planted in such a way that everything got along. So I think about that when I do my gardens, and how they relate is a word that's called Enowendawen, which is the word for relationships. In the garden context, it would be comparable to what today is considered companion gardening, but the word extends beyond that to include not only the other plants, but how everything is related. The soil, the insects, the sun, the wind, outside the boundaries of the Gittigan, but also ultimately the word refers to how everything relates to creation. So I think for me, it's a really strong example how a word connects me to my history, but also really informs like how I think about and set up my gardens today. So that's how I'm thinking about language.
Yeah, and that word, it is a kind of, because the word garden has so much, like you said, so many other kinds of connotations and other kinds of, brings up so much about different experiences of, you know, kind of exploitive labor and these sorts of things. But I like the way you talk about Gittigan, that brings it into this, these spots cleared and with the intention, right? And is there anything around like gardens or those kind of terms that relates to things that you're thinking of, Chandra or Joe?
Yeah, well, one thing that I thought of right away, because I know we got some crazy frog lovers in the audience. Gdigalgumaki is leopard frog. Just speaking of the same idea that William was talking about, all of the spots. Or Gdigalkons is the small deer, the fawn. And so that's you know, Gdigan or Gdigalgumaki, Gdigalkons, all of those sounds. And yeah, so I would have never, I don't know, I guess it's important or beneficial, I guess, to think in that about you know, that idea or impact as well that we get from the word garden and from other things all around us. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. William.
That's cool. That is cool. I love that. I also appreciate that mention of the cold water sort of settlement, or, you know, the cold water space there too, of how successful we were at growing, you know, food and things like that. Chandra, do you have any thoughts on this concept of garden or growing, or you know, sort of stuff that this term that William was talking about?
Well, I wanted to mention something else around language, though,
Okay.
that I've observed, because language is such a concern in Haudenosaunee communities, and there's been so many programs across all Haudenosaunee territories amongst all 6 of the nation's languages in terms of revitalization. But rather than, I mentioned some of the terms already that I was thinking of, like Akwa'umwe, Wagatari Hunde, and those things. I wanted to talk about language in the sense of that we can sometimes use it internally as a way to come together in terms of cultural revitalization as well. However, sometimes we can use it in a way that can be divisive. And I think what we can remember is that it's we share this collective history of reasons why we're not all sitting here speaking Indigenous languages. And keeping that in mind, then not playing the language game of, well, if you don't speak the language, then, or if you don't do this in the language, then, you're not enough of something. So for many years, I tried to straddle the notions of food and language and say, well, to think holistically means that nothing is more important than anything else. If you really think holistically, then everything is related, everything is interconnected, and everything is equally as important in a holistic system. But then for a while, I was thinking, well, I love the way that Ganyak Geha feels coming out of my mouth, but I can't do the reverse. I can't eat Ganyak Geha. So we have 2 really, really important issues right now. We've got issues around food and health and wellness and food systems and access and all the other things that go along with food. And then we've certainly got equal issues when it comes to language revitalization and retention. So I think the best thing that we could do would be to bring them together. So rather than saying food is more important than language or language is more important than food, ultimately we have to get to the conversation of talking about our collective health. And so that includes language, but we also have to be talking about what we're eating. So it doesn't do us any good to have a language program when we go meet at Tim Hortons, in my opinion. So the best thing that we could do would be to have language programs that are centered around food. That's my goal. That's what I would like to see happen.
That brings us back to my cooking show. Okay, now it's turning into a cooking show. No, it's just like a cooking hangout kind of. Anyway, yeah. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Do you want to? Okay, so we're talking about food and language, but I also heard everyone talk about a little bit, or anyway, in my mind, there's always this kind of connection between, and as Joe talked about, the connection between food and medicine. Food. And so I was wondering if anybody, this is a question for all of you, whoever wants to chime in first, whatever. Can you each speak to the concepts of food and medicine, or food as medicine, or medicine as food? And I know, Joe, you already kind of went there, but if there's any maybe ways that we want to think through that, and maybe language is part of that. So I'll put it back to you and see if Chandra or William or Joe wants to speak to that at all.
I think just looking at food as a totality, language offers us the best possible expression of everything that we do, but we should try not to let it make us, we all have enough reasons why we don't feel good about ourselves. Language shouldn't be one of them. Yeah. So if we can combine that with reasons that we do and can feel good about ourselves, then I think that's the best possible expression that we can have, is eating foods that come from our landscape and expressing those in Indigenous languages. Like, that would be the maximum, that would be the best thing that we can do. And I think that in itself is medicine, in that not in the strictest definition in terms of like medical or looking at it that way, but when we look at anything as medicine, like a good piece of art is medicine, Obviously, we're not injecting a painting into our veins, but it's just the concept that anything can be medicinal and that it's healing. And so certainly in that sense, food can be used as healing, not just for the actual substance of food, but for me, it's about sitting around at a table or the conviviality or just sharing food and conversation with people. That's a healing. So to me, that's also a type of medicine. I think Joe's got it covered when it comes to the food and the medicine thing.
Yeah.
But if we just take that other look at the healing and medicinal qualities of being with people and sharing food, which is coming from Indigenous food systems. You know, the food system isn't just about the foods themselves that come from a landscape. Everybody had a way of doing food. So when we think about how we do food, then we add another layer.
Yeah, so it seems like the medicine of food, or thinking about food, part of the medicine of food is that broader kind of sustenance, that, like, I think of it as sustenance. So it's not just like the food of, like, in your poem where you reference kind of this idea of just plugging in a 3-prong plug into your belly button to get energy. It's not just about that, but it's this broader kind of sustenance that you get from something, get from the food, whether it be like by, gathering with people with it, or harvesting and things like that. Anyone else want
That's
to?
awesome. Just the other thing that I can't stop thinking about that I better share super fast is comes up a lot in one of the programs that we teach, is all of the ways that Anishinaabe can support mental health and addictions. It's one of our top requested programs. And so when we're doing the addictions program, or the addictions portion of that program, one of the ways that we sort of frame our way to understand addictions is with food. And so the way that I frame it, which has been effective, it might not be accurate, but I think that, we're born with like this addiction to food. It's one of the first sort of reasons why we communicate is to scream for food. And then we learn to scream when we need to be cleaned. And then we get a little bit more complex as we age, but we're all born addicted to food. And I think that this is one of the a really important idea. And if when we start engaging with food, like from our past, like ancient food, our traditional food, it would really help if it tasted to what it's truly capable of tasting like. I mean, because I know you go to a feast and it's like, yeah, this is good. But I mean, yeah, it's got some Windsor salt, and we're using different ways to modify or flavor our food. And, just that other step of saying, well, we have our own flavors that we can use. And so just to support that addiction to our food, of course, enforced in a part of our culture is separation from that and control over that through various fasting protocols. But to support that addiction to our food, by making it taste to its fullest potential, using a bunch of, medicine, then our food is a lot closer to achieving that, even therapeutically medicinal potential. But yeah, as one sort of ruminating thought just while Chandra was talking.
I can add about the food and the medicine. I often refer to Geha vitamins, so vitamins K. So Joe, you probably like this one. So vitamin K is something that's come around lately as being really important, and like our K2, talking about fats and the ketogenesis and stuff. So I put together this little thing. I called it the Geha vitamins, because if we're only used to thinking about food in terms of vitamins and minerals, that's what we need from it, then we're just missing a whole lot of the point. So if we look at other vitamins K, like things like having a good mind and love. So sometimes the vitamins and the minerals that we get from the food, I think, are just metaphors from the other things that we really need from the food, which is, community and cultural continuity and love and all of those other things. So
That's the best.
What kind of medicine? William, did you want to?
Yes. I am reminded of the connection between the work I do in the gardens and it's important for health and well-being in a book I recently read. So I want to share that with you.
Okay.
Just recently I read Scott Momaday's House Made of Dawn. He's a Kiowa writer and visual artist, and his book House Made of Dawn was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in 1969. I read it years ago, but I just decided to reread it. I wanted to think about some of the things that he was writing about.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, this story that in this book provides a way to think about the connection between my work creating gardens for food and its importance for health. House Made of Dawn is a story about a young man. His name is Teo. He's a mixed blood, and he comes back from fighting in World War II. He comes back to the reserve, to the Pueblo. He's really kind of messed up and is trying to reintegrate back into the community, which is set in Walatawa, which is the native name of Jemez Pueblo, which is in just north of Albuquerque. The book is written in a modernist genre, drawing from the idea that the modern individual is lost in the fragmentation and alienation of modern society. And in society, there is not a center for one to go to find oneself. But Momaday, however, he subverts this genre by presenting the Pueblo as a center. And this is where Teo must find a sense of himself and gain wholeness and unity. The book is about his journey, his failings, the mythology of the Pueblo people, and bringing the different aspects of our identity together in order to find peace and well-being. To do this, Teo must move towards a certain, what he calls a temporal unification, where the past and his future comes together in an understanding of the present. And he has to do this in order to gain his health and to know his place in the world. And when I read this book, it's really similar to how I feel when I go into the gardens and work, especially my gardens in Curve Lake. I feel that it acts as a place where this temporal unification takes place. And I know health is much more than just this, but this is just one aspect for me that really helps. The land is there on the reserve. It consists of stories from our past. The work that I do in the gardens is about feeding us today, and is also about learning skills for our futures. It is a place where all these things come together, and a place where we, as humans, can connect to a larger world of plants, animals, insects, the weather, wind, rain, and to all of creation. And for me, I think when these all start to come together, I start feeling whole, and I feel centered, and I feel like everything is proper. And for me, that's one aspect of health. That's something that I just wanted to share.
Oh, that's really nice. I want to revisit that book too now. And I kind of, it connects to the relationships that we have with, whether it be that spot where your garden is or land in general, I think that's kind of a important point to what I got from your presentation and well, each of your presentations. I thought maybe I should change from the questions that I have to some, since we have, maybe a few 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes left here, to some of the questions from the people who are attending here. There's one that maybe you've already answered it, but this is from Hannah Juice, who I'm thinking, and this is the question, I'm thinking about food as medicine and the ways food can be used to heal relationships and language. And I wonder if any of the speakers could speak to food being a way to heal relationships to land. And I feel as though, William, what you just said is somewhat that, but if there's anything you wanted to add, and then maybe I'll ask another couple of questions from those who are attending here. I mean, even the concept of get again, in a way, there's something about feeling okay about the concept of garden, and that makes me, anyway, I'll leave it over to you if there's any thoughts on that.
Well, I have a way of, is this for me or for William?
It's for everyone. So if you wanna jump in, that's great.
Well, the opening with the Untitled Chapter, for me is really the way that I've been exploring that is by pulling the relationships from the creation story, but then by expressing them through the Thanksgiving address, you can utilize that in itself as a methodology. So for up until a few years ago, maybe 6-7 years ago, I had been hearing the Thanksgiving address just in context in community situations since I was 18. And then it dawned on me several years ago that it's really this brilliant assessment tool for your personal relationships to everything in the natural world. And that would include the people around you, the earth herself, the waters, the fish, and so on. So the way I've been developing it as a methodology is working with groups of people by showing them versions of beautiful pictures of each of the elements of the Thanksgiving address. So for example, one way is to put a still photo on a video screen if you have a large audience who've done this, or if I'm in an intimate setting with a small group of people, I have hand-drawn pictures that my husband and a friend of mine did. And I'll show them up so that people can just see the image because they're universal. So you could hear me saying it in Ganyatkeha or English, but you could see the image. And then you immediately think to yourself, what is your relationship to that thing? So for example, if you were to go from all of those things that I mentioned, you could use that to assess for yourself, what is my relationship with the earth like right now? Have I even thought about what my relationship is like to the stars? What is my relationship like to the moon? And then I took it a step further and I said, go back through every one of those things and see if you have an articulation for what is the relationship to that thing and food. For me, food was the one that is the most central, the one that you can most see across all of the rest of them. So then if you took food and said, what is the relationship of the sun and the moon and the stars to food? There's many different ways you can answer that. You can have a personal relationship with that, or you could say, what is my creation story? Tell me about the relationship that these things have to each other. So I think that in many cultures, it's built right in. If you look for and go back to the origin stories, that these relationships are already built right in, and then you can assess for yourself. In my life at this moment in time, what is my relationship like with these things? That's one way. I have other answers, but I'll let Joe and William answer first.
Yeah, no, just for me, I guess super fast is when you're one of the biggest barriers to accessing Schnabelmschicke or using plant medicine is issues around sustainability and running these plants into extinction but I think engaged in that the idea of a relationship, I mean, should be defined within the terms of reciprocity. So to be able to be giving, being able to understand a gift that the plant has to give you, but then to also learn a gift that you could give back to the plant. That's a gift that we have as a species that only people are able to separate themselves from instinct and say, I want to spend time with this plant, study it, and learn how I can help it. It's helped me so much. And so engaging in medicine with those, the normal parameters of a relationship, then we can ameliorate one of the biggest risks, one of the biggest barriers to access, just sustainable harvesting and things like that. So relationships and relationships to the land are super important. Yeah, that's a solid question.
So there's thanks. There's a question here for Chandra specifically, and there's so many questions that now I'm wondering. Quincy, did you want to ask your question directly rather than me? Are you there, Quincy? Quincy with a K. With a K. Quincy Logan?
So I just had a question
Yeah.
for Chandra. What Haudenosaunee customs and dietary restrictions are like specific to our culture?
What dietary restrictions are specific to Wikwemikong, to Haudenosaunee culture? Is that the question?
I think so.
As Quincy, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question. So what dietary restrictions are there in Wikwemikong or in Haudenosaunee culture? Is that the question?
Yeah, so what our like if we have specific food customs or if there's any specific dietary restrictions surrounding food.
I have to think about that a little. I mean, there might be in terms of stages of development of the human being. So I've asked this question. This is why I was wanting to make sure I was getting your question right, because the way I'm understanding your question, I've been asking that question of many people for many years. And I don't want to say that no one has been able to answer the question. I think I've not been asking the question specifically enough because I haven't been getting the answers that I wanted. So I'm still searching for a way to ask that question so that I could get some more concrete answers. But what I will say is this. One time, there was a group of folks wanting to get together to start some programming for young people around rites of passage. And one Haudenosaunee perspective that I got was around the issue of fasting, for example, when it came to something like a berry fast. So this is how I'm interpreting your question as a restriction could be that there would be a certain amount of time that you would restrict a certain food, a certain fasting. And some people will say that young women can choose to do a berry fast. So say for a year, she would refrain from eating all berries. And so when I mentioned this to this other woman, she said, we don't have that. She said, in Haudenosaunee culture, we're supposed to take what's given and give thanks back for that in reciprocity. She said other people do that. And she mentioned specifically that she knew of that was an Anishinaabe custom. So I think what's been happening lately is that because there is so much intercultural sharing, you have lots of Haudenosaunee people that do things that come from other cultures, other surrounding cultures. To me, it doesn't make it any less Haudenosaunee. It just means that you've taken information and that you've interpreted it into your own mind and answered the question for yourself, is this something good for me to do or not to do? So in that sense, I think there isn't a whole lot of things that necessarily are not Haudenosaunee. It's just that you are free to make that choice for yourself as to whether that's something that's going to work for your body. So to specifically answer your question, I've not come across a whole lot of restrictive things, but they would be around certain life events like pregnancy and birth and a certain rite of passage, perhaps, going from adolescent, puberty stage into becoming a young man or a young woman. So I think it has more to do with timing events than it just does, or like hunting, for example. Your men going out for a specific thing are not going to have certain foods before they're going out on a hunting expedition. So to answer it, I think you need to look at the time periods than just something in general. I don't think that people would be too into eating snakes, for example, if that would answer your question. There tends to be other people out west that might work for them in their culture, but in Haudenosaunee culture, I don't know too much about something like that. However, eels were certainly something that were on the menu. So that's a whole subject we could talk about for a really long time. But I think there's a certain freedom in a Haudenosaunee mindset about when it comes to food.
Yeah, thanks, Quincy. Does anybody else want to? I guess that was a very specific one for you, Chandra. So I'm going to turn back to my little list of questions for a second. We have a lot of questions, really great questions, and I found out that we actually have more time. So we're going past, yes, yay. We're not just going till 4, we're going to 4:30. So those people in my class who were supposed to meet after this for a debrief, we're meeting at 4:30, not or close to 4:30, not at 4:15. Okay. Back to my, I just wanted to maybe switch. What's that, Chandra?
Can I just finish up? I just saw in the chat.
Oh yeah, sure.
Somebody asked another specific question about clans.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a great question. Thank you. I didn't think of that in my answering of Quincy's question, because this is also a question that I've asked of people over the years, and my husband, who's been asking for longer than I have because he's a lot older than I am. So when it comes to clans, there are differing views. It depends on what Haudenosaunee person you ask, maybe whether they're male, female, whether they're older or younger, in what generation they're coming from, because I have heard both sides. I've heard people say you should not eat the animal, you know, of the clan that you're from. And then I've heard other people say, that's kind of silly. It's not practical. I'm gonna say that somebody of the deer clan is not going to eat deer meat, you know, ever. Or someone of the eel clan is not going to eat eel, just because it's not as common anymore that for anyone to eat turtles. But I'm sure at one time that was much more common. So I think that we don't have a solid answer on that. I think it's just going to depend on who you ask. I've actually read things. I can't think of if it was Waugh, perhaps in some of the old anthropological notes around Haudenosaunee foods, that actually said the opposite, that eating some of the animal material from your clan animal would actually be enhancing for you. So there's all sides of the spectrum out there. And so since I don't think that there's a definitive answer, I think there's some freedom in that for you to decide if that's something that you would want to do.
All right. Does anybody, Joe or William, you want to respond to that at all, or got any thoughts? Or if not, we can. William, you're muted. I think William, did you want to say?
Yeah, I'm not a, that's not my expertise. I don't know about
okay, yeah.
much about that.
Okay, well, maybe we could turn it over to some, just shift a little bit in terms of thinking about something that is really important to me, and that I know that each of you have thought about and work with, is art and food, and that kind of art, food, medicine intersection or overlap. And I was wondering if maybe you could tell us about, William, and I know this is how we know each other, through food, through art, and like, what do you value about these intersections of like food, land, performance, and art? If there's anything that you'd like to share with that, and then others, Joe and Chandra, you could also chime in if you want.
Should I start?
Yeah, sure, that'd be great.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I have another story. I started putting the idea of art and gardens together a long time ago, but it's just been recent that I've started actually doing them in my curatorial work. But I lived in New Mexico in the early 90s. I had a friend who lived at the Jemez Pueblo, and he used to invite me to their corn ceremony. And I loved going out there. I'd spend all day. And I also went to the Tawas Pueblo for their corn dance. In 2016 and 2018, I had an opportunity to go back and visit the Pueblos again, as well as going up to the Hopi Reservation in Arizona to conduct research for my art projects. Okay, and what I wanted to do was I wanted to really think about their connections to art and gardens, because it's so close. I mean, and I was interested in the kachinas and some of the dances, because I was working in performance at the time. I wanted to know about the corn dance. I wanted to know a little bit more about the bean dance and the blessing of the fields. On the Hopi reservation, I was interested in what they call the Pawamuya dance, which is the dancing of the beans, and that takes place in like February, early February. And bean sprouts are given to all the villagers, and the children would race through the village. So I took my stepson, and I wanted him to participate, but it's really difficult because they don't really have a schedule. It's when the elders are ready. So I went out there. I learned a lot about it, but I wasn't able to participate. And it was through this research that an elder said, he said that you can't do art unless you have a garden. And to him, he says, it just doesn't make any sense. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think how I interpreted this was that, and you have to remember how dry it is out there. It's extremely dry. And so that all their dances and their visual art, like the kachinas, they're all directed towards bringing rain for the garden, so the gardens can grow and there will be food for the people. And so the art is all about ensuring that the cycle continues. But here we don't have that problem, although we did have quite a nice drought last summer. But I still think about those words, and I think about them when I'm creating my gardens, but I take them a little less seriously when I'm creating my gardens and my art projects. For me, what his words are telling me is that it's really important to connect my art projects closely to the land, that the gardens are about growing and sharing food while gaining a deeper understanding of the cycles and all of those relationships that happen in a garden. And it's also as a way to help us understand our place within that creation and those cycles. So yeah, that's what I learned when I was down there. It was really profound when he said that. So that's something that I've carried with me, that there is no difference, or you can't have one without the other. I mean, the same elder said that, he was giving a talk once and someone said, well, why don't you just, put a big old pipe down into the ground and just keep digging until you get water, and forget about all this stuff and just, water your gardens. And he said, well, he thought about it for a minute and he thought, well, if we did that, we'd have to get rid of the kachinas, or we couldn't relate. We wouldn't have the kachinas. So it's like, okay, so you've got the gardens to have art and you have art to have the gardens. So I always really love that relationship. So I think about that a lot when I do my work. Like, it has to have those elements in there for me to feel like it's successful.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that idea. Thank you for making that really, really clear connection between those things. Which brings, because the garden then it also, really brings food into and the art. It's not just like food being a material in art or something like that, but it brings it to a different kind of level, and I don't know. Oh, I was gonna ask Joe. I was gonna ask Joe something. I looked up and he's gone. Chandra, we didn't. Did you want to talk about this in terms of like food and art and the way that art has sort of functioned in thinking through food for you as well? Maybe Dana could show that picture, that image too. I don't know.
In a second, if we could. Okay, well, you can keep it up there for a minute then.
Yeah, you don't have to talk about it right away, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, I have a lot that I could say about this. I just want to add a little. The west side of Buffalo in me needs to make a little bit of a comment there to what William said.
Sure.
So
please do.
Absolutely, of course. I agree, and I love that you shared that story of the elder out there saying about that connection between having a garden and making art. Certainly, I agree. And I also, 25 years ago or so, I started one of the first community gardens here in Buffalo. And I was working at the Native American Community Center here as a teenager. And so I asked them, could I use a small plot of land? And we did that. So yeah, I definitely love the idea of gardening. But I also like to, look at food again as this larger piece, this totality, because so many issues come into that, like maybe I just don't like to garden, or maybe I'm just not good at it, or maybe I don't have access to land to garden. And so there's a whole lot of other things that go along with that. So I just want to remind us that in the bigger picture, there's a lot of things that go along with that, because where I live now, of course, I live at the Six Nations. Yeah, we have big, huge garden and all that kind of thing. But, to kind of stay true to my roots, I want to just, throw out there and remind us that food is a totality. There's a lot of ways to relate to food and to the land. So I think my interpretation of what that garden really means, and it's the metaphor for working with the land and having a relationship with the land. So even though I would say I do directly have a relationship with the land through gardening, I feel like I have a relationship with the land, with the earth, with my spirituality. I mean, I've grown 5 human beings in my belly, so I think that there are other ways that we can have this relationship. I just happen to love food as the relationship. Just to be mindful that, sometimes people don't have access to doing things, and that I like to say sometimes, even if the only thing you can do in the food system is eat food, just be a mindful, responsible eater as much as you can. There's a whole lot that goes into it. But going back to your question specifically about art, Lisa, I think for me, it was just a natural kind of relationship, because as a person who has been in the kitchen as a quote unquote stay-at-home mom for a really long time, and even before that, having taken interest in making my own food, preparing my own food, I saw the connection between art and being in the kitchen with food through creativity. So when you're in the kitchen, you are essentially an artist with food. You're having to take these different materials and put them together and to make this one, hopefully beautiful, aesthetically delicious piece that you or somebody else wants to eat. So I think there's the connection there. But for me, it's also about the process. For me, the process of making art and the process of preparing food are very similar. Sometimes I almost feel like something else is taking over and just coming through me. So for example, when I'm making foods, when I'm making real foods that have come right from the earth, you think about it, I didn't really do anything. I didn't, if I happen to be eating an animal, I didn't hunt that animal. I didn't hunt or fish or trap or always grow. For me, a salad is a really funny example. People always comment that I make such good salads, and I just laugh because I didn't do anything to make that salad. I just threw it together. I didn't press the olives to make the olive oil, or whatever the fat is that I'm putting in there. I usually didn't grow the lettuces or the vegetables or the nuts and the seeds and the berries that are going in that salad. So really, I'm just kind of this artist of a salad. I'm just putting these things together. So that's a connection with me through the process of art and food. And Donna put this one up here with corn, and that's another really good example. Like, there's so much that has to go into the processing of corn that I have the understanding of where that comes from before the beginning of time on the other side of the sky, right through our creation story. But I feel like the corn has a life of its own, so it's not necessarily something that I feel like I can take credit for sometime. I'm this medium. I'm like the middle person sometimes between the spirit forces in the food, and then mixing it with the earthly forces, and then giving it to people. So I think that's where the love comes from when people talk about the love cooking. But Dana, could you go back to that other picture for a second of our collaboration? So I love this piece because this was a collaboration that Dana and I did together that she invited me to be on, that I felt very fortunate. So here's a way that we came, using food and art together. So this is actually using the substance of food, in this case, corn, as part of the art. So even, Dana's idea of having those 2 purple rows, certainly representing the 2-row wampum belt, she basically made paint from mixing purple corn flour and water, and painting that on the walls. And each one of these little tiny things that you can see were corn kernels, corn that had been lied, and then we put needles through them to make them look like little wampum strings. And then the ones on the bottom were Dana's idea of the plantain was the medium that she was using. And so I like this piece because, well, for so many reasons, aesthetically, I think it just came out great, but because it's, to me, this idea of co-collaboration in artwork, I think is the methodology of the future. Like, I think this is what we should all be doing. It's just meeting people, eating maybe, and then, just making art together is to me a really good process of everything, reconciliation, all these things. It's just a great, two really fabulous things to do with people are to eat and make art together. And then one of the best parts about this piece is in the corner there on the floor, you can see this pile of dirt. So Dana put a bag, I think, of like potting soil on the floor. Now this is in this warehouse, kind of concrete on the floor. And she puts this soil there, and she put some of the plantain, and then she put a few corn kernels in there. And I think it was about a month later that we were going to be doing a presentation. She says, the plantain died and the corn sprouted and grew. So I thought there was something so beautifully metaphoric about that you can take a pile of dirt on a concrete floor and put some corn kernels in there, and a month later, look at what you have. Like, the resilience of corn to me is just amazing. And this just speaks to the whole idea of what this is about. You see the two-row wampum on there, you see plantain, you see corn, you see the giant representation of the corn braid, the two different colored corn braids. And then you have sprouts on a concrete floor in the corner of a warehouse. So I think that just speaks volumes in and of itself.
Wow. I'm really glad to see that piece. That is amazing. I have heard that there are seeds sitting and some sprouts of corn around like North Toronto that are from early, long time ago corn cultivation. I forget who was telling me about that, but that those sprouts really explain right now why that could be happening. Amazing. Thank you for showing that work that you did with Dana. And I like the idea of making art together as a way to communicate too. Like, there is a kind of exchange as you're making something together and I would argue that happens when you're making food together too, just similar to what you're saying. I think there's a kind of communication that happens in an exchange that's really important because your senses are all involved, not just it's not just language too. There's like a kind of, all your senses are involved. So there's a kind of response that can come out in the way we communicate, which, I think is really, really valuable. Hey, Joe, do you have any kind of thoughts on the art and food question, or would you want to move on to any questions that are coming up in the...
Yeah, well, I mean, just very quickly, just what I immediately think of is one of the most fascinating ideas that I'm always in constant pursuit of is the ability to tap into. We have this understanding that every plant has a story that it's telling you. I mean, if you would just give them the time and spend some time with them and understand them, you would be able to tap into these stories and listen to what they're telling you. All the plants are communicating to you. We need to listen. And so my favorite thing as a part of all of the work that we do is giving people the tools they need to understand or tap into those stories. So it's real simple. I could even run through like super fast examples where we have every plant. It's a very simple technique. I mean, you just find what makes the plant unique, what makes that particular plant special, what separates it, what feature does it have that separates itself from every other plant that's out there. And it's through that uniqueness that this plant is communicating to you, and where we could listen. And so one of the ways that I really like to make sense of that we're all pretty well familiar with is like strawberries, you know, we call them demnon, heartberries, obviously because they look like your heart, but also to dig into the literature to identify, you know, different scavenging activity for heart tissue specific reactive oxygen species. So it has a bunch of lycopene, a very famous antioxidant that supports your heart health. So we really like these ideas, you know, carrots in your eyes, but also blueberries in your eyes. And you know, one of my favorite ones here, like, or even like leaves. You look at sweet fern, which I mentioned earlier with the cinnamony stuff. Has this this very unique looking leaf, and so, you know, if you look closer at the shape and structure of this leaf, we call it gabaagamish because of you know, and you go number 2, this is the one that we use to help stop there from being blood present, which is you know, inflammatory bowel diseases. And this is what we use to control that. And so in the structure, embedded in the structure of the plant, or in the uniqueness of the plant, we could see the folds of the colon and sort of uncover the story, you know, one of the reasons why it's here. And, you know, this idea goes back to our creation story, where, you know, there's a consultation between the creator and everything that he created to be able to make who we are. So you get that first little Anishinaabe sitting inside of the shell. That shell is a representation of all of the creation that has existed so far. We were the last things to be created. And so you have a representation of everything previously created as that shell. And the consultation was between the creator and everything that has already been created, our human body being the representation of all of the elements that make up earth, and then the spirit from the creator being given to us to be able to make who we are now. And so when we talk about this idea, listening to plants and listening to the stories that they have to tell us, we're able to see evidence of this, where every part of our body, every organ, system, and process that our body has and goes through, there's a mirror image in the natural world. And those corresponding those corresponding body parts or reflections that we have within us indicate to you a purpose that it has, a potential that plant has. And so this is one of my favorite ideas and presentations, is to really look at plants, learn how to look at plants and uncover these stories and learn the potential that they have. One of my favorite ideas is that every plant, you know, they serve an ecological purpose, and humans are the only creature on the planet that can remove them from that purpose and kill them, remove all the water from them, all of the life from them, kill them, and then bring them back to life, put them back inside of that water, bring them back to life with a whole new purpose to be served as, or to be used as medicine. And purpose and potential utilization of gifts that these creatures have been given, offering the potential for a plant to satisfy gifts that it has is, you know, I really just love the representation of these in the stories that they're telling us, and all of the different shapes and structures that are out there. We need to take a little bit longer look and say, what are you saying to me? What are you telling me? And you know, that's what I think of when we talk about art and medicine. You know, how does this how can these two worlds help us to be able to understand each other? And I think that, you know, this idea of plants being storytellers in and of themselves help with that, help to allow these two I don't know how to say, disciplines sharpen each other. So you can go into all kinds of real cool stuff. That's what I'm flipping through. All kinds of different plants and body parts that they represent, and it's just really fascinating. One of my favorite ideas, and just that's what I really think of when you ask a question like that. And
that's that's the the form that you find in the plants, like you're saying, the story is the sort of, it comes from that form. And I didn't realize that idea of creation, and that, you know, that all of those things are kind of what was like the recipe for what we became or whatever, you know. So that is, I'm just sort of blowing my mind at this point. So I'm kind of speechless now. But that's amazing. Thank you. And it comes back to that kind of communication too, like to understand each other. I got a lot to think about. Thanks a lot for that. Now, even though I said earlier that we were kind of getting low in time, we are now actually getting low in time together. So I thought maybe we could end with a question, just sort of thinking about that, just like a little, you know, brief kind of sending off kind of statement, because I'm thinking about those who are joining us today who, you know, live on reserve or in the city, or who want to learn about medicines and about our food and how to grow, or don't have access to land, but want to have this knowledge, and but don't have it right now, or, you know, little ways that they can gather this. And I want to open up with, or I want to open this up to you to ask you if you have like some words of encouragement or a place to start from each of you, and then we'll close things up. Is that possible? Is that too much to ask in a small, brief thing?
No, that's okay. I'll go, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, it just reminded me that, you know, I used to think, you know, to be Haudenosaunee, you have to have a garden, you have to grow corn.
Mm-hmm.
Then, you know, there's just too much involved with that. So I think that wherever you are on the planet, you are who you are, and you can connect to the natural world, including people around you. And one way is to simply use that Thanksgiving address as your personal assessment tool. You can see the moon and the stars and, you know, some of those higher elements, no matter where you are, even if you're, you know, in a concrete jungle somewhere. So I think that just to keep in mind that, you know, you can relate wherever you are, and you can have access to things wherever you are. Once you remind yourself that you are already a complete whole human being, who you are and where you are, you know, then we can move into the practicalities of, you know, how can you have access to growing something, or how can you, you know, create a system where you have access to foods and do some type of reciprocal relationship with someone, so that you can have access to things that maybe you don't have, and you can trade something with them, even if it's just knowledge or assistance.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Chandra. William, did you want to send people off with some seeds?
Sure. Yeah, that would be great. I wish I
Yeah.
could. I usually do that for performances and things. I often leave people with food and seeds, but I'd say just start anywhere. I have done guerrilla gardening. I've done, you know, gardens in small plots. And it was just, I think what I was really after when I first started was I just wanted food that really tasted good, you know, and that's where it started. And then once you start cooking with your food, it kind of grows from there. You really look for other people who are doing gardening and food. I've done community gardens, which are always really fun. You find yourself within a community of gardeners, and there's nothing that gardeners like to talk more about than their gardens. And so you'll end up with tons of information and ideas. And I've always found it to be just such a great community. And with community gardens too, you know, you come out there when you can. It's not like you have to be there all the time. And often people take care of, like, they'll water yours and you'll water theirs, which is fun. And it was through my work in these gardens, community gardens, guerrilla gardening, and gaining that knowledge that I ended up at Curve Lake with a large garden for a few years. And that was really nice. You know, it was a little struggle getting water and things like that, but that was okay. And I got to hear a lot of stories of gardens in the past, people growing food, and just, you know, stories about food. And I got to I started getting really interested in like the health and its connection to our traditional foods. So I started really focusing on like old traditional beans and old squashes. And still working on a little bit of corn, but from there, you know, it just grows, and it's really fun. So my suggestion would just be start anywhere, and gardeners never think that you don't know anything about gardens. You know, they don't care. You know, no one ever thinks you're not smart or judges you because you don't know much. Because I've found that true gardeners know that there's so much to know about gardening that if you don't know something, that's fine, you know. So never let it intimidate you. And after a while, what happens is you go beyond the, you know, growing food for yourself, and you find yourself moving into this other kind of aspect of gardening, and that's like the, you know, connecting with the land. You're constantly worried about the weather. You're watching the weather. You're worried about your plants, and you start caring about them, and so you learn about those aspects. You know, so. Yeah, I would say start anywhere and just kind of move along, see where you go.
All right. Thanks, Miigwech. Joe, do you have any thoughts to just send people off and encouraging them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the things that I couldn't stop thinking about is, you know, like for all of the participants who have been here and who will watch it later, you know, one of my main jobs and purposes, I guess, is just motivating and encouraging people to spend time with plants and learn about how to access their potential as a medicine, and then you know, inherit that benefit. And it's just really interesting too, though. I mean, like in every problem, sickness is something that we're all very familiar with, and it's like this day and age, you know, it's pretty rough. But one of the things that we really need to do and really master is, given a problem, identifying and establishing a scope as soon as possible, so that we can know, you know, really what we're dealing with, and be accurately achieving the potential that we're capable of. So when it comes to health, you know, you think of my great grandma. She had a solid life, she lived to be really old, and when she was old, she was like super fit. She walked everywhere. She walked like 30 kilometers there and back to go to work in her 70s or late 60s. And so she was like tank, and so aging from an Indigenous perspective not too long ago was a fantastic process. There was no frailty, there was no chronic disease, at least not until later. And so I think plant medicine, and certainly its inclusion into the food systems, is super important to be able to achieve the life that we're capable of having. But what we have to understand is that we have inherited a health, and so and to identify a scope to the problem, we need to, like, my wife was pregnant with our daughter, and she gets these notifications that about, you know, how big she's getting in the belly, that our daughter is getting in the belly, and one day she's sort of like looking out the window, and she said, I just read that Ruth, we already had her name, Ruth has developed all of the eggs that she will have for her entire life already in this past week. And so she realized in that moment that everything that she did, every trauma she was exposed to, every bad night's sleep, every food she ate, every food she didn't eat, all of the days she didn't drink enough water or drank too much water, whatever it was, all of that had a direct physical impact on our grandchildren. And so if we're looking at, you know, the inheritance of health, we have inherited a certain state of health, and plant, or, you know, this inheritance is called our epigenome. And plant medicine is one of the major tools that allow us to be able to live with our epigenome without the negative consequences of that, you know, bad inheritance or that degradation of our health and food systems to land us in the situation that we are now. And so if we are able to understand plant medicine as a tool to be able to live with the bad or inherited epigenome without the negative consequences, then we could look at when are we going to be able to offer or how long is it going to take to be able to, you know, completely heal that inheritance or that epigenome. And so for us, if we're raising our daughter with all of these different knowledges of plant medicine, and so from drinking it all the time, cooking with it, and bathing inside of it, and really taking all of these different tools that give her the ability to live with that inherited epigenome. We're looking at Ruth's grandchildren as being the first generation that's able to be separate from the degradation that we inherited. So we and it's just funny, you know, the way that everybody talks about seven generations and things like that. That's 3 generations of maximal degradation, 3 generations that we're going to have to work to be able to heal or fix that. And the 7th generation is going to be the first one that could potentially be separated from that. I think that's a really important perspective to understand as for this audience as well, both medicine's role, but also like the importance of establishing or utilizing these food systems and engaging in food in that way. That's the goal, really, when I think about what we're going to be capable of, the role of food. All of those other cultural components, including medicine, are super important to be able to achieve that.
Yeah, that's great. Great encouraging words when you to think about life in terms of 7 generations. So that's a really great place to close things up here. And we went over a little bit, but I really appreciate everyone being here, and especially appreciate William and Chandra and Joe for being here and having this conversation. I'm really honored that you took the time, and thanks Dana for being there in the background to make all these things happen too. That kind of brings us to the end of our this MIIJIM session, and we have one more that is in a couple weeks, so stay tuned. I think it's on November 24th, and we're going to be talking about labor and food and migrant workers. So hope you can make it. Anyway, all right, that was great. I loved it. So it was so good. I feel like it's the beginning of many conversations. It's the beginning of so much, but anyway, I always have a hard time ending because I just want to stay here forever with you. Okay, so
thank you, everybody.
And we have a lot of questions we didn't get to, but we will share that chat with the panelists, because there were some excellent, really good questions. Sorry, I didn't get to everything. Sorry, Dana, you go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, and thank you to all the speakers and the wonderful audience. I hope you got to see some of the comments. We are saving the chat and sharing it with all the speakers. There's been a lot of love and a lot of knowledge shared on the chat and also on YouTube. Just wanted to bounce some love back to you all. Thank you. I hope you continue with a wonderful evening, wherever you are.
Nyawe, miigwech.
Miigwech.
Bamapi.
Guabdaben.